Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there was a king. But this king, he loved gold. Oh, he was a real miser. He loved gold. And he was at one of his doings there one day when he met a miller. Now, a miller is a man that grinds up corn or something like that. And he said to this miller, he said, I have never met you before. He said, who are you? He says, well, I'm John the Miller. And he said, well, that's fine, John Miller. That's how the name John Miller started. He says, yeah, I'm John the Miller. So anyhow, this miller said to him, you know, your Excellency, your Royal Highness, he said, I have a daughter, and she has a thing that she can do that you won't believe. You know, he was getting kind of excited because he was talking to the king and everything else, and he kept looking up and said, she can do things that you would never believe that she could do. And the king said, well, no, what do you mean, John? What do you mean? He says, well, Your Majesty, do you know that my daughter can take flax and straw, and she can spin it on her spinning wheel, and she can spin it into gold? He says, you mean that your daughter can take straw and make gold out of it? And he says, oh, yes, 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 because he was getting caught, and he was telling something that wasn't true, and he was getting caught, and he says, oh, yes, that's what she can do. And the king said, well, you bring her to me, and if she can do that, I'll give you a very big reward. So the miller brought his daughter up to the castle and introduced her to the king, and the king took her to a room where there was a spinning wheel in there and a whole great big pile of flax. He says, now you stay there tonight, and when I come back tomorrow morning, I want all of that flax spun into gold. And she just looked at him because she didn't know what he was talking about. So he left the room, and the girl sat down, and she said, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, lackadaisy on me, what shall I do? What shall I do? Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. Poor little me, I have never spun flax into gold. I don't know what I'm going to do. Then she heard a little scratching outside, and she looked, and there was a little man there. He said, I'll help you. And she said, who are you? Oh, he said, never mind who I am, but I can help you. And she said, well, how can you help me? He says, what will you give me if I get all of that flax and I spin it into gold for you? What will you give me? She says, I'll give you some gold pieces. All right, all right. So he sat down and he started to spin, and sure enough, he spun all of that flax into gold over that night. And the next morning, the king came and he opened the jar and he looked, and here's all this big pile of gold in there. Oh, he says, this is wonderful. I'm so glad that you did that. He says, that's fine. He said, but now that was just good for starters. He said, tonight, I'm going to take you to a bigger room with more straw, and you can spin that all into gold, too. And she thought, well, nothing more I can do about it. So he put her in that room that night, and she sat there and she thought, now maybe if I work this right, maybe that same little helper, that little man that came will come back and help me again. So she sat there, and she couldn't spin because she didn't know what she was going to do. So she sat there and she thought to herself, she says, oh, little man, would you please come back? Maybe, little man, you'd come back and help me again. Just then she looked over, and there he was over in the corner again. He says, I'm back. Do you want me to help you again? She said, yes. Would you spin all of this straw into gold again? He says, well, what will you give me for it? He says, you have to give me something. What will you give me? Well, she said, I've got this ring. He says, all right, if you give me that ring, I'll spin this flax into gold. So she said, okay. So they worked all that night. And that was a big room. Oh, my goodness, it was bigger than these two rooms put together. And the next morning, when the king came back, the little man had gone away. And when he came in, here is this whole great big room all full of gold. And he says, oh, this is wonderful. Look at this, look at this. My goodness, he said, I didn't appreciate I can get all the gold that I ever need from you. He says, you know what I'm going to do? He said, I'm going to put you into a great big hall full of flax. And if you'll spin that all into gold, I shall marry you, and you will be the queen. He says, but if you don't get it done, I'll cut your head off. No, it's kind of wicked, you know. I thought it'd be like that, but he was a funny sort of person, probably a stranger someplace along the line, or different nationality or something. But anyhow, that's what he told her. He said, either you go ahead and you spin all that up, or else I'm going to see to it that's the end of you. But if you do it, I'll marry you and you'll be my queen. So she sat there that night, and she thought, here I am, in the middle of it again, Twice I've gone ahead and done what he wanted. Now he wants this great big, I don't know how I can ever do it. Maybe that little man will come back and help me again if I try real hard and concentrate on him. So she sat there and she concentrated. Little man, come and help me again. Little man, come and help me again. Just like that, he popped up in the corner of the room. He says, here I am. What do you want this time? Oh, she said, I have this great big room full of straw, and if I can do this, the king will marry me and I'll be his queen. But if I don't do it, you're going to cut my head off. And the man said, we can't have anything like that happen. He says, I probably could go ahead and spin all of that stuff up and make that gold for you. It doesn't mean any difference to me. But he said, what would you give me? What have you got you can give me this time? She says, I gave you the money that I have. He said, I know. I spent that already. He's a funny sort of a guy. And she said, then I gave you my ring. Oh, I know. I pawned the ring and I spent all that money too. And he says, oh, what else have you got? What do you give me now if I go ahead and do all of this? Oh, she says, I have nothing left. There's nothing I can do for you. And he said, I'll make a bargain with you. She says, what is the bargain? He says, I will spin all of this flax into gold if you will give me your first baby. And she thought to herself, well, I'm not figuring I have any babies or anything like that. That's way down the line I'm worried about. She says, okay, that's a bargain. So he went ahead and he spun all of that flax into gold. And the next morning the king opened the door and here's all that gold. And he says, oh, my beloved one, soon we shall hasten, we shall have the wedding nuptials. I will marry you and you shall be my queen. And so he did. He was as good as his word. He married her and he brought her into the castle there and had a beautiful place to live in like that. And things went along pretty well. And after a while, she had a baby. And she had a beautiful little baby that she had. Oh, she loved this little baby very dearly. And she never even thought about that little man that used to come back and forth. She paid no attention to him. And one day she was in the nursery there, and she was playing with the baby, when all of a sudden there came a tapping on the door. And she opened the door, and she looked. Holy smokes, here's that little creature standing there. And she says, what do you want? Well, he says, I came to get what you promised me. She said, oh, what was that? I don't remember. What did I promise you? He said, you promised me that I could have your first baby if I would spin all of that flax into gold. Well, now that's what I want, or I'm going to tell the king all about it. And she says, oh, don't do that, don't do that. And she said, oh my goodness, she says, isn't there anything? She says, I'll give you a lot of money and I'll give you jewelry and everything else. He says, I don't want that. I want what you promised me. You promised me I could have that baby. And now you aren't going to give it to me. And she said, oh, please, 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 won't you do something to help me out? She said, you wouldn't want to be all mean like that. And so he thought, well, you did give me some money and you did give me the jewelry. So he said to her, I tell you what I'll do, Your Majesty, because being a queen, she was a majesty, see. He says, I tell you, Your Majesty, what I will do. I'll give you 3 days, and each one of the 3 days, I'll come back, and if you can guess my name, you can keep your baby, and you'll never see me again. And she thought, well, that's going to be simple. So she said, okay, and he says, I'll come tomorrow, and I'll let you guess, and for 3 days, and if you don't guess in 3 days, I get your baby. Okay. So she thought, okay, so that day she went ahead and she got a great big piece of paper and she wrote all different names down that she could think on there. Had everything all ready. The next day she was in a room there and he came in and he says, can you guess what my name is? And she looked down her list and she said, is your name Heather? No. Is your name Paula? No. Is your name Todd? No. Is your name Greg? No. Is your name Earl? No. Is your name Jenny? No. Is your name Nancy? No. Is your name Barbara? You're never going to guess it. You're never going to guess it. I can see that. You're never going to guess it. You have one more name today. And she said, well, could your name possibly be Susan? No. I'll come back tomorrow. That's the second day. So the second day, she thought, this might be difficult. So she called in 4 of her people that worked for her in the castle, and she said, I want you to go north, I want you to go east, I want you to go west, and I want you to go south, and go to the limits of the kingdom, and I want you to find all of the names that you can find and bring them back to me, and I've got to have them no later than tomorrow. So they left to bring the names, and so finally, the next day, 3 of them had come back, and so they brought them all the different names that they had there, and so she wrote them all down on paper, and in came that little man, and he said, "This is your second chance. So you're only going to get one more chance yet." And she said, "Well, I think I can guess your name today." And he says, "Oh, all right, you start guessing." So she started looking, and these people had gotten some crazy names, you know, all over the whole kingdom. They'd gotten all the funny names. He said, "Is your name Spindleshanks?" "No." "Is your name Turtle Legs?" "No." "Is your name Monkey Balls?" "No, nothing like that." "Ho, ho, ho. My goodness, the names that you come up with, you'll never guess my name." Well, she says, "I'm not through guessing yet." "Is your name Jessica?" "No." "Is your name Moochie?" "No." "Is your name Mignon?" "No, no, no." "Is your name Peppy?" "No, no, no." "Is your name Mattie?" "No, no." "Is your name Russell?" "No." "Is your name Susan?" "No." "Oh." He says, "You're never going to guess my name." He says, "One more chance tomorrow. I'll come back tomorrow. And if you don't guess my name tomorrow, I'm going to get that baby. Don't you forget. I'll be back tomorrow." The next morning she woke up and she was beside herself. And she thought, "I've done everything I can do to get all these names and I haven't even come close yet." She said, "I wonder what happened to that one other man that I sent way off to the south." It had to be down south, you know, because that's down West Virginia way. And they would have some different names down there in West Virginia to bring back. And she hoped that she would get a new name out of West Virginia that would go ahead and foil that little tramp. So anyhow, she thought, "I just hope that this other man shows up." Well, you know, she thought all day long, and she had a few names she came, but didn't mean anything. And just it was almost time for that little man to come. She looked out from the castle window, and there came a man riding a horse. And he jumped off the horse and he ran up and he says, "Oh, your majesty, your majesty." He says, "I think maybe I can help you." And she said to him, she said, "Well, did you come up with some other names?" He says, "Well, I haven't come up with any names, but the funniest thing happened to me." He said, "When I got way, way down south, way down below West Virginia, way down below Virginia, way down below Georgia, down to Florida, way, way down there, I got down there." He said, "I looked, and it was dark at night, and I looked, and there was a little fire, a little campfire." And he said, "I rode up to see what was going on." He said, "And there was this fire burning, and there was the strangest little man. He was there, and he was cooking in a little pot over the fire there. And as he was cooking, he would dance around the fire, and he was dancing a little, he was singing a little song." And he said, "It was the funniest song." She said, "Well, it was a song." And he said, "Oh, guess as she may and guess as she can, but she'll never guess my name is Rumpelstiltskin. Ha, 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 ho, ho, ho. Pretty soon that baby I'm going to have, ho, 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 and I'll never have to work again, because I'll send that baby out and going to work for me, and I won't have to work anymore, but she'll never guess my name. Ho, 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 yes, sirree, that's my name. My name is Rumpelstiltskin, but she'll never guess it." And he says, "You know, I copied that all down, and I brought it here for you." And she said, "I wonder, could that possibly be?" And so she thought, well, I'll try, and if I fail this time, I'm going to lose my baby. So pretty soon the time came, and there was that knock on the door, and she opened the door, and she was very tearful, and she says, "Oh, please, couldn't you do something to help me? Couldn't you release me from having to do this?" He said, "No, that was our bargain. You're going to guess my name, and if you don't guess my name, I'm going to get that baby." And so she said, "Is your name Reuben?" "No." "Is your name Carmichael?" "No." "Is your name Heather?" "No." And he started to jump around. He says, "I know you can't guess it. I know you can't guess it. I'm going to get that baby. I know you can't guess it." And she looked at him and she said, "Is your name?" And he said, "Yes, yes." She said, "Is your name Rumpelstiltskin?" "Ah! The demons have told you! The demons have told you! You never could have guessed that! It's terrible! Oh, what am I going to do? She's guessed my name! I don't know what I'm going to do anymore!" And he started stamping around the room, stamping his feet in the ground like that. And pretty soon he got so excited, he stamped one foot so far down in the ground it went way up to his knee, and he went to pull that one out, and you know what happened? He pulled off and the leg stayed in the ground, and that was the end of that old troll.